Hello, I'm Christy Hay, and this is my presentation for Ecology, Religion, and Consciousness Beyond Anthropocentrism. Today I'll be sharing what the river, the earth, and cosmos ask of us, a three-level spiritual ecology praxis of attention, reparation, and cultivation. I didn't realize I was walking through the world as a spiritual ecologist until this course gave me language for what I already felt and had begun in practice, that the earth and all living beings are sacred, and that religion and spirituality can either deepen our relationship with the living world or perpetuate our disconnection from it. I've often returned to this T.S. Eliot quote, and the end of all our exploring will be to arrive where we started and know the place for the first time. Prior to these last few years, my understanding felt like a 1,000 piece puzzle dumped out of the box. I had a felt sense of the picture, but not exactly sure how the pieces fit together. Catholicism and Middle American culture had been my starting point, which was mixed with domination narratives and separateness, so God felt confusing rather than connective. Early grief and family mental health challenges scattered the puzzle further, and my separation from my body and the earth reinforced that disconnection. So during this term, the course reflections, the readings and assignments and discussions assisted in giving structure, giving more language for what I had previously sensed only in fragments. Knowledge helped in combination with the embodied and contemplative practices I have, creating an expanded perception, providing me with clearer visions of how our interdependence works with others, the river, the earth, and the cosmos. As Joanna Macy writes, we are beginning to realize that the world is our body. So I believe it is through this realization that we can arrive where we started and know the place for the first time. In the reflection exercises assigned, I was able to identify that my ecological journey has been lifelong, but also is a continually emergent practice. In 2018, I had an intense desire to tell stories connected to this place we now call Oregon. My software engineer husband and I subsequently launched a GPS enabled driving tour app called Together Anywhere. Here, our business partner is pictured at Oregon's Crater Lake National Park, a place like most public lands holding complexities tied to all the paradoxes presented in this course that are a constant contemplation between human and nature, mind and body, self and other, between spiritual and cultural inheritance and governance, specifically the indigenous governance, between human and more than human world, between local ecologies and a larger cosmological horizon. My own spiritual ecology model is primarily focused on praxis that can move us away from this binary that can emerge, with an emphasis upon the interrelatedness between the individual and the collective whole. So I've often thought about one of the most transformative climate change experiences of my life while engaging with this course material. It was September 7th, 2020. It was the end of a beautiful Labor Day weekend. After months of COVID restrictions, tense politics, and increasing isolation and polarization, the world felt a bit more free on this beautiful day. People were tired and struggling, but for many throughout the state, the worst year in modern memory was about to turn even more tragic. The conditions could not have been more prime. It was a hot and dry summer combined with unprecedented high wind warnings. We were 2 months into burn restrictions and there was no rain in sight. Some communities opted for rolling blackouts to lessen the chance for power lines to create sparks. And still, with many precautions in place, chaos took over late that Monday evening. The leftmost picture is from the early afternoon where my friend Mickey and I spent a few hours on the banks of the Willamette River with our dogs, enjoying the clear skies and one of the last warm days of the summer at the river. But on the drive home, we noticed an ominous haze of smoke covering the sun. Heavy smoke began to permeate throughout Salem and the entire Willamette Valley. The next morning, we woke up to ash falling like rain from a dirty yellow sky, which intensified into an apocryphal red as the day progressed. My anxiety, already heightened from a job loss, starting a business of my own, and the state of the world, went into full on panic. Smoky skies in the late summer months were something Oregonians had grown accustomed to, but it had never been like this before. This really felt different. I demanded to my husband that we leave the city and head 1 hour north to a friend's property for fear that the fire was coming towards our home. My anxiety was nothing new, only having grown in recent years. The year before, it had even heightened to the point of riding trains across the country so I didn't have to fly. My weight had ballooned as I tried coping with a dramatic job change and COVID and a ton of unresolved grief. But at this moment, suffering from this intense fear of death and destruction and feeling the pain of the burning world, I did hit a climax and a turning point of my own emotional and spiritual crisis. I really needed to breathe again. Once we were about 10 minutes north of town, the skies did brighten up a bit. I was able to take a breath, settle my body, and orient myself down from my panic. I agreed to return home back down the interstate. But many people would never go home again. The city was spared, but inside the dense forest were small communities where the fires raged. Residents found themselves with mere minutes to gather loved ones and belongings before having to escape, with the flames in hot pursuit. Over the next few days and weeks, multiple fires raged in this statewide emergency, and in the end, over 1 million acres were consumed, 4,000 homes burned, along with 1,000 other structures destroyed. 9 people died. Smoke covered most of the Pacific Northwest as the stricken forest and communities smoldered and ash fell from the sky, keeping the air quality hazardous to all living things for many more weeks. I cried for all of the people, for the animals, and for the plants and the trees. Our pristine Oregon wilderness never felt so raw. Many factors led to this destruction of multiple fires, yet drought and climate change, which leads to a reduced snowpack in the Cascade Mountains, drastically increases risk for areas that receive wildfires. Colonizers to Oregon had dismissed indigenous land practices, and as a result, over 100 years of fire suppression and prevention created conditions that allowed the fires to burn for weeks. 2 days prior to it all starting, my husband and I had gone out to test our driving tour along the Mackenzie River to the east of Eugene, Oregon. We had stopped at Finrock Landing to let our dogs play and be in the water. We returned the following month to see a drastically different landscape. The white circles here, use the old bridge structure for a reference point. Unbeknownst to me at that time, I would become much more connected to Finrock in the months and the years ahead. Many heartbreaking stories emerged after the fires. As communities along the highway began to rebuild, one specific person, their place, and their story stood out to me during my revisions to the driving tour. As our business partner narrates, imagine yourself now driving down this charred road of charred trees taken by this area's wildfire outbreak known as the Holiday Farm Fire. With the trees gone, we can now clearly see the icy blue, rough waters of the Mackenzie.
The community of Finrock is easy to miss. Even its Wikipedia page is brief and recognizes only one notable resident. Not Benjamin Franklin Finn, but award-winning author Barry Lopez. Mr. Lopez was interviewed in 2016 by local Eugene public radio station KLCC about his connection to the Mackenzie River. His words no doubt resonate today.
Well, a trouble that most of us have is the way our moods affect our work and our relationships with other people. And when you apprentice yourself to that river, it reinforces a kind of calmness in you, no matter what the weather is. If you saw your moods as weather passing through, and the miracle, if you will, is it just keeps going. It absorbs everything. So what that's telling you is adapt. When very bad stuff or disturbing stuff or challenging stuff comes along, it's foolish to fight it. I've got 46 years of keep going out of a river.
Questions were asked to Mr. Lopez about his desire to contribute to a literature of hope and how the Mackenzie River has taught him. He answered,
I would like at the end of my life to say I had lived up to the expectations of that river.
Sadly, Barry Lopez passed away from a battle with cancer on Christmas Day 2020 in Eugene, Oregon, just months after losing his home in the Holiday Farm Fire. While distanced from his teacher, his river Mackenzie, he no doubt lived up to the expectations of the river, leaving behind this literature of hope I was able to share with you today. Mr. Lopez left us with some large questions to ponder, especially in the aftermath of what he called a climate change event. What does the river expect of humans? Are we listening to the river as it wants to be listened to? Do we really care?
His posthumous collection of essays, Embrace Fearlessly the Burning World, feels prophetic as he invokes presence and attunement to the changing climate and a potential path forward regarding the inevitable pain and suffering across the globe. I'm grateful to Mr. Lopez for his wisdom and call to those of us who feel the fear and pain of the burning world. 3.5 years into my own ecological healing journey, I wrote this poem, Burn. I am burning on a trajectory of clearing all that was before, moving outwards in all directions to show that there are actually no paths, just the worn down ground of where many had walked before, who had all been convinced that this was the way to get there. but I was not convinced. So I trusted the only thing that was true, a still, silent voice from the inside, both capable of destroying so much and also able to start something anew. I once learned that the sequoia trees are a network of growth that require fire to live, but one day someone stopped them from burning. Then another believed, and another, until they forgot what they needed. Over time, the family became smaller and smaller until someone finally questioned their need. We need to burn, they replied. Just one spark will help us die. Just one spark will help us live. From the perspective just described, combined with the journey in this course, this question emerged for me. How do religion and spirituality as lived cosmologies and practices shape the evolution of an ecological self and a planetary community beyond anthropocentrism from an Oregon ecological context? My childhood disconnection to place eventually led to a cross country move to Oregon in my late 20s. I was drawn to its diverse, wild beauty. An internal conflict then arose for me when working at a Native American boarding school, and I yearned to understand the real stories of this place, even those holding grief and pain. Yet, working in the travel and tourism industry further increased my moral conflict, and my hope for a more conscious collective had all but disappeared when the fires occurred. And in my recovery, much like the plants and the trees and the river that recovered from the fires, it wasn't enough to focus on telling stories of change and transformation. I had to transform. I had to notice where my personal evolution was blocked. As a result of this work, this model emerged as a framework that integrates personal transformation, collective responsibility, and cosmological imagination. All three spirals are threaded by a river of spiritual integration. In my paper, three influential Oregonians will be highlighted as the embodiment for each spiral of spiritual ecological practice. As instructed by Barry Lopez, our individual call to attend and mend requires presence and devotion to what is around me, both joy and sorrow. It means I have to mend my own hurting body. More than aesthetic appreciation, it's a practice that brings grief, responsibility, and repair into view. So, this is where religion and spirituality show up as a formation. Attention trains perception until it becomes obligation. Joanna Macy helps here because grief is not a detour, it's evidence of love that can metabolize into action. Lopez's line, "Apprentice yourself to that river," reframes place as a teacher that forms character. The bridge to the meso level is that micro attention does not hold by itself. It becomes reinforced by structures of shared stewardship that can carry responsibility over time. And bridging to the macro, when the river becomes teacher rather than resource, it rewrites cosmology, opening the imaginative ground for a planetary ethic beyond anthropocentrism. I first encountered Chuck Sams when I heard him speak at the State of Oregon Travel and Tourism Conference, and what struck me about him was how clearly he framed stewardship as responsibility carried at multiple levels. Public lands are contested cosmological sites because what we believe land is, resource, recreation space, or a living relative, determines how we govern it. In this mesolayer, religion and spirituality show up as a public obligation. Care becomes real when it's encoded in governance, law, stewardship, and practice, an interpretation that can protect the more than human world across generations. This builds on micro level attention because without grounded relationship, governance can become just bureaucratic substitution. It also sets the stage for the visionary and cultural stories that make governance durable. Prolific science fiction writer Ursula K. Le Guin is the macro spiral practice figure because she treats fiction as cosmological training, not policy. As I read her book, The Word for World is Forest, I noticed how the conflict isn't only political. It integrates many frameworks of domination, those that are racial, gendered, sociological, structural, and ultimately cosmological. Forest as world versus forest as resource. In this short book, dreaming functions as a consciousness practice, as an alternative way of knowing and being embedded, and domination appears as a contagious cosmology. It's a story that spreads through violence and extraction, but precisely because it's a story, this can be altered. This is religion at worldview scale, based on reason and ethics, much like my research in Eric Fromm's work in PRC 710. From a visionary standpoint, Le Guin helps me imagine an ethic that doesn't yet exist, an emergent spirituality oriented beyond anthropocentrism. If we indeed evolve towards a planetary community, we must create and map a future by acknowledging, without collapsing into despair, through practices of grief and healing, so imagination becomes commitment and cultivation. So in this course, a central shift for me was decentering the human, not as an abstract idea, but as a change in moral imagination. For plants, animals, waters, and places become participants rather than backdrop. The critical theory lens helped me recognize how domination narratives and hidden power, patriarchy, racialized and gender hierarchies, and destructive ideologies show up in our relationship to the world. This course also insisted on cultural specificity, that different traditions and practices and their relationship to place embed humans with earth in distinct ways, and those differences really do matter. Anthropological and evolutionary evidence also challenged the modern assumption of human separateness by showing how human development has historically depended on nestedness, community, caregiving, and expansive relations. Importantly, spiritual ecology readings framed religion and spirituality as formation. They connect cosmology, practice, and ethics, shaping what we perceive, what we desire, and what we feel responsible for. And grounding that in indigenous sovereignty and sacred places keeps this work accountable rather than romanticized. Overall, the course framed religion and spirituality as a force that can either deepen relational life or justify the structures that destroy it. This course gave me the language for what I was already living, seeking nestedness in a system of domination and practicing moral imagination beyond anthropocentrism. Now I feel more capable of naming competing frameworks and domination narratives, allowing introspection without collapsing, and taking responsibility for my part in the whole. And perhaps because I've been on my own grief journey, even feeling the grief of the trees, I feel most connected to Joanna Macy's work. And as I shared in my Nepalese presentation, Vandana Shiva also inspires me through her work in change from the individual to the collective. We learned so much in this course, but the concepts of deep ecology, social ecology, critical theory, eco-womanism, and evolved nestedness were definitely the highlights. My paper will continue to show the place where my story became discipline, inquiry, and practice, along with the three figures I've presented. The model I have shared here is my attempt at a framework for holding introspection and spiritual practice, governance and responsibility, and creation of what has yet to be seen, all through spiritual ecology. Today, the earth is no longer a backdrop or just a resource to me. It is and always will be a relationship. I would like to continue knowing and connecting to her more and more. My attention, practices, and vision have sharpened, and I trust that emergence will continue. So I will leave you with two questions. What does the river expect of us, and are we listening to its answer? And one question from Barry Lopez. Is it still possible to face the gathering darkness and say to the physical earth and to all its creatures, including ourselves, fiercely and without embarrassment, I love you, and to embrace fearlessly the burning world? Thank you.